Today's video is going to teach you the key ways to tune vocal tracks while preserving the characteristics that make the performance natural. And as I go over these tips, I'm also going to show you how I like to work so that I can make your life easier when you go try to implement all of these different strategies. And if you can master these concepts, artists will love you. That being said, this video is going to be for people who already have some basic knowledge of how Melodyne works. It's also okay if you don't, because the strategies are conceptual. There are a lot of other tutorial videos out there that you can go watch to figure out how the software works, and then you can apply the things in this video afterward. This video is also for the engineers who want to improve their Melodyne skills, and also for all the producers out there who are having to take on more of the engineering responsibilities, especially if you're an independent musician and you don't have the resources to pay an engineer for certain parts of the vocal production process. So let's get right into it. In order to demonstrate these strategies that we're going to employ to keep the vocals in Melodyne sounding natural, I'm going to go ahead and use a project I worked on recently with Tevi Love, and the song is called Quarantine and Chill, which just recently came out. We're going to go ahead and use his raw vocals, which I'm sure is unforgivable. So I went ahead and transferred the raw vocals into Melodyne for us already, and let's just go ahead and pull open Melodyne. And the first thing I like to do is just pull up the zoom tool so I can get a good feel for what's going on. I like to be in pretty close so I can get into the details of it. Now, the way I like to work is to use the DAW for all of the transport controls instead of Melodyne, because if you use the onboard transport controls of Melodyne and you actually press the spacebar like you normally would with any DAW, then it will transport you to where your DAW is and not where you were in Melodyne, and it'll completely ruin your workflow. So that's why I like to work that way. So what do we need to do to keep the vocals more natural? Well, what we shouldn't do is select all the vocals and go to the macro knob and just slide it to 100% and call it a day. To be clear, this is going to take a lot more work than it would be to just do that, but in the end it will be worth it because it's going to sound a whole lot better. So the first thing we want to do to keep the vocals natural is to avoid adjusting the transition points between the notes. And this is one area where I think most people get it wrong, and it's the most essential to preserve the human quality of the vocal performance. So let's go ahead and take a look at one example of that. And what I want you to pay attention to specifically is when he says the word baby.
Quarantine and chill, you ain't gotta go nowhere, baby. Ooh.
So it's not far off right now, but let's see what we can do when we take a look at it. So if we were to correct this as normal, we would probably just open up the pitch tool, double click on each note, and see how this sounds.
Nowhere, baby.
Which is not bad, but we can make it even better. So what I noticed is when the transition of the note happens, it's a little bit flat on the very first part of the note, and then it goes a little bit sharp after that. So what we can do is open up the note separation tool so that we can split the note apart in a couple of different sections and attack them differently.
Go nowhere, baby.
So what we've done is we've preserved the human quality of it because he actually starts the note a little sharp on the D when he's going up to the E, but that's part of what makes his voice. And as long as he ends up at the right note, then we're making good progress on making it sound more pleasant to the ear while preserving the natural qualities in the human voice. Now, what we could do is we could correct that to be exactly in the correct center and see how this sounds. And it has just, you can almost tell that it's been tuned that way, whereas it's a little bit harder to tell if we move it back to where it was. It's a lot more subtle. Now let's go ahead and look at another example of this. And this time I want you to pay attention to what's happening in the word no.
I can cuff you to the bed, girl, you know what time it is, yeah.
So we can kind of hear that the no on the second half of the note it's a little flat, the B that he was going for right there. So if we wanted to correct that while being mindful of the note transition, we might do something like this.
I can cuff you to the bed, girl, you know what time it is, yeah.
So as you can see, I corrected the beginning and the end of that vocal run, but I kept the transition where it was, even though it looks like it's a bit off. It's actually a lot more natural of a sound than if I had corrected it to the middle, which let's take a look and see what happens when I do that right now. So if I correct this part of the note, where it would be chromatically, let's see what it sounds like.
I can cuff you to the bed, girl, you know what time it is, yeah.
It's not too bad, but it could sound more natural, and it'd be better if you just left it alone. However, there is one exception to this rule, and that's when you are looking at whether or not the vocalist overshot or undershot the note that they're trying to hit, in which case you actually would want to mess with the transition and where they first hit the note in comparison to where they hold the note. So listen to the very end of this phrase. He starts the note a bit flat, and then his vibrato kind of brings him a bit sharp. So we're going to figure out how to handle his vocals in this situation in order to preserve the natural qualities in his voice while also correcting for the pitch.
Know what time it is, yeah. Bad girl, you know what time it is, yeah.
Now, another really important thing for me to point out here is that when Melodyne is analyzing all of the notes, it's doing so on an average and not necessarily where the note should be. So you need to go through and you need to figure out exactly where the note should be accurately represented and then fix it yourself. And this is where the macro will really let you down. So what I've done here is I've split the note apart, and the initial attack of the note has been corrected to the right pitch as well as the vibrato. Even though it still runs a little bit sharp, I'm going to leave it that way because that's the quality of his vibrato and that's what makes him sound like him.
To the bed, girl, you know what time it is, yeah.
And I even forgot to leave that other one as it was. And if you hear that you overdid something like I did where I just left the note chromatically in the center, which I didn't want to do, go ahead and select the note and then reset the individual edit of the pitch center, and it'll bring it back to where it was recorded. Now here's a little tip for when you want to use the note separation tool in a natural way. Always split the note where the note's deviations crosses the very middle or where the pitch center is supposed to be. So in this case, if we pull open our separation tool, we can divide it right here, and that's the most natural, I've found the most natural place for you to split it from, so you can adjust each one individually.
Know what time it is, yeah. Know what time it is, yeah.
Now when you're splitting the notes apart and trying to be mindful of the transition, you can use the pitch transition tool, but in my experience, it sounds a lot better to do it manually than it does to use that tool. So next we have the third tip I want to give you, and that's pay attention and be careful correcting the blue notes or any other embellishment in the vocal performance. I see a lot of people correcting these to a chromatic note, which has a significant impact on how natural it ends up sounding. Vocalists bend in and out of the notes just like guitar players do. So you want to be really careful about this. And you don't want to overdo it with Melodyne by attempting to fix these blue notes. They're essential to the natural character of the vocal. So let's go ahead and look at an example of that. So when I play this, I want you to focus on the part of the melody he sings when he's saying the words you and that's a fine.
Off, put this on. You can leave the crib, let's have fun.
So what you'll notice right away is that the words you and that's a fine are both out of key.
You.
That B flat is not in key, and the A flat is not in key either. But that's okay because, again, that's a natural part of his performance. So what you can do with these is you can move them a bit closer to where their pitch center should be. So in this case, the B flat would be pushed down a bit, and you can just hold Alt and click, by the way, to drag these notes down. And you can move this A flat closer to the A. Maybe correct that note a little bit, and then see how this sounds.
You can leave the crib, let's have fun. I can cuff you to.
Only if you feel it's necessary, though. Now, a really good example of this is actually in the hook of this song when he's saying quarantine and chill. The first half of the hook has a blue note in it, and the second half of the note has the same melody, but it's actually supposed to be in key on the second half only. So it would be a really good example to show you the difference between the two and how you actually might want to include both. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the hook, and I want you to focus on where he says the word chill on the first half and where he says the word chill on the second half, and the difference between those two in the melody.
Girl, let's quarantine and chill. Let's quarantine and chill, baby.
So let's go ahead and split these notes up a little bit and see what's going on with the melody.
Girl, let's quarantine. let's quarantine and chill.
I'm just going to show you an example of how I would probably pitch correct this part. So I can see these are a little bit flat, so I'm gonna go ahead and double click to get them to where Melodyne thinks their pitch center should be. Drag this one sharp because Melodyne was incorrect in that circumstance.
Girl, let's quarantine and chill.
Okay, so according to the scale, this note should actually be here.
Girl, let's quarantine and chill.
But it sounds really weird, so we don't want to mess with that part because it's actually an intentional part of the melody. But if we go to the second half of the hook,
let's quarantine and chill.
I'm going to split up the notes one more time like I did with the first half of the hook, and then we're going to take a look at the difference in the melody, especially where he says chill. Okay, so this might be your starting place.
Let's quarantine and chill, baby.
Okay, so as we can see, when he says chill this time, he actually goes all the way up to the B, whereas over here, he only ever makes it to the B flat. So this is something that you need to be conscious of and make sure that you know which part is supposed to be part of the performance and which one isn't.
Girl, let's quarantine and chill. Let's quarantine and chill, baby.
Now, it wouldn't sound right either to correct it the way that he had it before, because it would sound like this.
Girl, let's quarantine and chill, baby.
Which is not right. That's not what the melody is supposed to be.
Let's quarantine and chill, baby.
That's what the melody is supposed to be. So there's all kinds of vocal embellishments that happen all the time. A lot of stuff doesn't even make sense right away, that it would be different on the first half than the second half, but that's exactly how vocal performances go, and you really need to be cognizant when you're editing the melody, because really you have a responsibility to the artist and you don't want to mess with their melodies. There are actually even situations that you come across where the vocal melody is sitting right in between two notes, in between two semitones, and it gives a sort of strained quality that is key to the emotional output of the performance. And it definitely wouldn't be the same if you corrected it. Which leads me to the next point, which is you need to use your ears and not your eyes when you're doing this type of work. Because a lot of times what ends up looking right doesn't sound right and doesn't feel right, and vice versa. And you have to remember that music is not an exact science, and the voice does a lot of things that don't necessarily look right, but they do sound and feel right, and that's the most important thing. So I put together a couple of examples that demonstrate this concept. Let's take a listen to this section of the vocal.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
You see where he says stairs, it's actually right in between two notes. And if you corrected it, then it might sound like this.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
So that's not quite right. Now, if we brought it down to where it should be diatonically, then it might sound like this.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
You can hear it dipping. So actually where it does belong is right in between those two notes. So let's go ahead and reset the pitch center on that.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
And actually, when he says marathon, the exact same thing applies too. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, we can see that the apex of the pitch line that Melodyne draws for you is actually in between the two notes on marathon as well. So if we drag this up, holding all to the pitch center, let's see what that sounds like.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
Which is not bad. Now let's see if we corrected it down one and had a bigger jump.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
So you're gonna have to make a judgment call in these types of situations to see what sounds the most natural to you. To me, I liked it right where it was when he recorded it. So let's go ahead and move that back to where it was.
Been gone, then run up the stairs marathon.
Which to me sounds the most natural of all of them. So when you look at the grid that Melodyne has created for you, neither of those notes look like they're in the right place, but they sound like they're in the right place if you want to make it sound more natural. So that's why it's important to use your ears and not your eyes when you are making this type of decision. So to give you another example of this, I just want to bring us back to an earlier part of the song, and I want you to listen to the way that he sings the word home.
Alone when we both home, no need to kiss and tell.
Okay, so you can hear that he doesn't quite hit the note exactly on, so what we can do is we can take the note separation tool, split it apart at the transition, and then I also want to grab the pitch drift tool and go and literally bring it all the way down. So let's see how this sounds.
When we both home, no need to kiss and
You might think that this looks a bit extreme, but actually the way that he hits it, if you are employing the very first principle that we talked about by being mindful of the transition between the notes, you can actually go more extreme with the center of the notes and it will sound the way that it should sound. So let's go back to the way it was.
when we both home, no need to kiss
And then this is how we changed it.
when we both home, no need to kiss until we both grown.
So the beginning and the end of the note have actually been preserved, but the center of the note we've gone pretty extreme with, and you can do that. Now, as a bonus workflow tip that I want to give you guys, if you're melodyning multiple vocals or you're melodyning background vocals, make sure that you've already tuned the main vocal, and then while you're tuning the background vocals, make sure you have the main vocal playing so that you're not correcting to the wrong note and you are sure about the way that the melody is supposed to go with the main vocal. All of these little imperfections and idiosyncrasies in the voice are actually what gives it the heart and soul for the most part, and the emotional qualities as well. The pitch can always be corrected, but the emotional content in the take can't. You just have to be aware that you're not influencing the emotions too much with the way that you are correcting the pitch. And like I said, this process does take extra time and effort, but if you really care about how the end product turns out, then you'll want to put in the extra time and effort to make it sound as good as it can. And honestly, if you don't feel like you have time to do tedious tasks like this, people hire me to do it for them all the time. And if that sounds like you, just shoot me an email with what you need done, and I'll also include it in the description below. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and let me know if there's anything you want me to go more in depth on. All right, see you next time.